franktalks.com.
Relationships, sex, passion with Dr. Laurie Betito. Hear the show live weeknights 10 to 11 on CJAD 800.
Welcome to Passion, a show about love, sex, and relationships. I'm Dr. Laurie Betito, your host for the next hour. Tonight it is our regular monthly feature that we call Dating Dilemmas. I'm joined by Frank Kermit, who is a dating coach. He's also a best-selling author and educator and the relationship columnist for the West End Times newspaper. He joins me every month to discuss topics related to dating. And tonight, of course, no exception. We are talking about asking the hard questions. Like, how do you know when to ask, what to ask, at which point, when is it, when is it appropriate or inappropriate to ask certain questions? And I'd love to hear from our listeners tonight. What are the weirdest, maybe some of the rudest or inappropriate questions that have been asked of you on a date? What's the one thing you wish you would have asked your partner before you started to get serious? And what about lies? Did you ever ask a hard question and then caught your partner in a lie? And, sometimes these hard questions can catch you off guard and you don't know how to answer. You don't know whether you should lie or not. Well, I don't even know if that should even be an option, but we can talk about that tonight. 514-790-0991. Text us at 514-800. If you're calling from your cell, it's Star Talk, star 8255. Frank, welcome back.
Hi, Dr. Laurie. How's it going?
I'm good. So I hear, little birdie told me, you're going to be at the Montreal Bridal Show, the Salon de la Mariée, at the Palais du Congrès this weekend.
Yep, going to be there Saturday and Sunday. I have a booth there, and I'm going to be talking to married couples who want to know what they should be discussing.
Engaged couples.
Engaged couples as
right.
well. That's right. Engaged couples, couples to be married.
That's right.
Wanting to know what they should be talking about prior to the wedding and prior to getting married.
So it kind of relates to this show. You would think that couples getting married would have already discussed and asked the hard questions. But I do know that, sometimes years later, they end up in my office and those questions were never asked. Like, do you want kids? Like basic ones like that sometimes, how shall we raise our children? What religion? All these things that have never been discussed.
Ideally, everybody should know what it is they want and make sure they communicate that while they're still dating. That doesn't happen. People get caught up in the romance. Sometimes they're too afraid to ask the question because they're too afraid to scare off the person.
Right, but then they might lie, and that's not a very good thing.
No.
You wrote an article this week, if we could talk about that for a minute, in the West End Times, Ex-Lovers and Weddings Do Not Mix. How does this relate to asking the hard questions here?
Well, if you're planning to get married and you're planning a wedding, one of the hard questions you need to ask each other is there going to be anybody attending this wedding that you had sex with? And at the very least, the two people getting married should know about each other's sexual history as it concerns the wedding guest list.
Okay, why? I mean, okay, yes, I get it, but give us some anecdote.
Because if you don't know what's going to happen and somebody may show up, get drunk at the reception, that's not the place to be finding out for the first time.
Okay, you told me a story before. Are you allowed to say it on the air?
Absolutely.
Okay, I want to hear it.
Here's the story. I was at a wedding where it was a beautiful wedding. Everything was, picturesque, absolutely perfect until the reception. Turns out that the maid of honor had a previous relationship with the bride.
With the bride?
With the bride.
Okay, so a gay-lesbian relationship.
They had a gay-lesbian relationship. Okay. Whether it was just an experiment that took on, for a very long time, or whether it was something serious is still in debate. What's not in debate is that the maid of honor drank a little bit too much at the reception and started to tell stories about... Out
loud, like with a microphone and everything in front of everybody?
Not in a microphone,
okay.
No, but to whoever would listen to her.
Oh, okay.
And I'm a good listener. So here I am finding out details about how they started in high school and it was sort of an experiment and they kind of started dating. And then during their college years, they would go on cruises together and they made a pact that at every port they would try to find some lucky guy and have a threesome. And I mean, when these type of stories came up and the more I listened, the more graphic it got. I wasn't the only
The
person.
drunker she got.
Yeah. And I wasn't the only person, finding this out. Now, unto itself, everybody has a past, and whether or not somebody's sexual orientation is straight
it's
or gay
their own
or bi,
thing. Mm-hmm.
it's their own thing. I don't have a problem with that. I think the main issue, though, is that the groom had no idea that this had happened. He had no idea about his wife's past in this regard. And what a way to find out.
At your own wedding.
People were going up to him. And at one point, like most people were going up to him saying, listen, this is what's going on. I just want to prepare you. I want to let you know. But when it turns out that he had no idea about the past and these stories were coming up, some of the wedding guests ended up, making fun of him.
It's a bit humiliating when everybody else is hearing something and you don't know and you didn't know about it. And
Exactly.
people are coming up to you and you're like, you're supposed to react. And how are you supposed to? You don't even have time to process the information.
And to go through that and have a taint on your wedding day. So the rule for me is no ex-lovers at the wedding unless both people getting married know about what's going on, about who's there, and they're both okay with it. So if something like this does come up, at least the couple is not caught off guard.
Right. So is that one of the hard questions to ask? Well,
one of the hard questions to ask, if you are going to get serious to the point where you're thinking about getting married, you want to know about the person's sexual history. You want to know, hey, wedding, did you have sex with anybody that would make me not want to marry you? Like, did you have sex with one of my cousins?
Right.
Those are the types of things that you definitely want to know before you get serious, because after you get serious, that's really, really a bad time to be finding out these things for the first time.
I heard one story where an affair was discovered at the wedding. The wedding went through, but the marriage did not. In other words, they went through the wedding but they went on separate honeymoons.
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine? I mean, that's horrible. I mean,
It
we're
is
laughing,
horrible.
but that's horrible.
It is horrible. And, if you ask the questions, that doesn't guarantee you're going to get a straight answer.
Yeah, that's true too.
But in most cases, if you ask the question, you at least put it out there that says there's either a suspicion or I want to know. Or at the very least, you're communicating this would not be acceptable if that's the case.
Right. Well, coming up, I want to talk about some of the early questions so that it doesn't sound like an inquisition, but how to get the information that you need in order to determine whether this is a good person for you. And I think, sometimes we struggle with how much is too much to ask or how much is too much to tell and when. So we'll talk about that with my guest, Frank Kermit, here on Dating Dilemmas on CJAD 800.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
Dating Dilemmas here on Passion. Every month, Frank Kermit joins me. He's a dating coach. He's of franktalks.com. He's written many, many books on the subject of dating. And we're here to talk tonight about asking all the right questions, or what are some of the wrong questions to ask. So the hard questions are usually the ones you ask when you decide it's going to be serious, right?
Pretty much. There's always going to be hard questions you're going to ask, even from the first date, depending on what it is you have as a boundary. For example, some people make it a point to say, I will not date, even casually, someone who's gone out with one of my friends. And if you're part of a large group and you think, I think that at some point, these two people may have dated. Now I'm on a date with this person. If they did date at all, I don't want to do that. Some people have those type of rules.
Right.
So the hard question to ask on that first date is, look, I want to know before this goes anywhere. Were you involved with my friend? Mm-hmm. For other people, if it's a non-issue, you don't need to bring it up. It's all about what your personal deal breakers and your personal boundaries are that will dictate what is an important question to ask.
Right.
But especially if you are thinking about getting serious with somebody, if you are thinking about getting married, getting serious, having kids with somebody, you better ask those hard questions before you get tied in, especially if you're thinking about getting married.
Right. What about the beginnings of a relationship? Like, are there questions you shouldn't be asking, like first date, for example?
When you're on a first date, asking the person if they're seeing other people really isn't your business until the two of you start getting more serious. So if you're only seeing each other once a week, asking them to tell you about their other relationships, really is not a good place to go. The fact is, on those first few dates, you want to see if you connect with each other. And you should go in with the understanding that chances are, if you like the person, other people like that person too, and they probably are dating a few other people. They're probably involved sexually with a few other people, depending on where their personal boundaries are.
But what if you're not comfortable with that? What if you need to determine that? I can tell you when I was dating, I couldn't date more than one person at once. I would date one. If that didn't work out, okay, I'd date somebody else, but never more than one.
If that is where you feel comfortable with, then that's fine. But if you want to start telling the other person, listen, as long as you're dating me, you shouldn't be dating anybody else. If that's a personal boundary for you, then that's one of the hard questions you need to be asking right away.
Okay.
I do think, though, that it's somewhat unfair to go up to somebody and say, look, as we're getting to know each other, you're not allowed to date anybody else.
Right.
Because you basically,
I get that.
You're saying, take yourself off the market while we get to know each other. Well, if you don't earn any sort of commitment or place in that person's life after, 3 or 4 weeks, for 3 or 4 weeks, they've lost the opportunity to connect with others. If anybody were to tell me, while you and I are dating, you're not allowed to date anybody else, that's okay. I don't need you in my life. You're making an unreasonable demand on me. Gone. Red flag for me.
Right. Which is interesting because we all have our different boundaries, and I think that's what we have to start with is what are our own boundaries and what makes us comfortable or uncomfortable.
It's the same thing like when somebody says, do you want to have kids? Well, I will if my partner really wants them. That's a non-answer. That's telling me you have no clue as to what you want. That's a red flag.
Yeah, and that's another thing we need to talk about is which answers point to red flags, which is why we ask the questions, because when we ask the questions, that's when we get to see some of those red flags. I mean, aside from the just observing and watching, but sometimes it's hard to read between the lines. So sometimes the direct questions give us a little more of those answers. We have a text message for you, Frank. What is the best way to introduce yourself to a woman you like? Example, in a grocery store. I try to say something funny.
Okay, best way to introduce yourself to a complete stranger is what I'm taking it. 2 ways to do it. You can go in absolutely direct. Hi, I saw you from over there. Something about you really, drew me to you. It could be what she looks like, what she's wearing. And whatever it is, you can simply say, I found you attractive. I wanted to meet you. Introduce yourself right away. Now, the wonderful thing about going direct is that you're not wasting any time. You're going in, you're exchanging phone numbers, you're getting a...
Well, if you're lucky.
Well,
if you get that far.
If she happens to just like the way you look, okay, or she likes the way you approach, she likes the fact that you were direct, you have an in, and then you can, try to set up that coffee date. However, depending on what you look like, depending how you might come across, depending on the environment as well, she might be in the grocery store, but she might be in the grocery store where maybe her sister-in-law or someone is in the next aisle and she's kind of worried about how it's going to come across, even if she did want to meet with you. Then there's indirect, which is my personal favorite because that's what worked for me. May not work for everybody, but that's what worked for me. You go in, you basically go into storytelling. I would approach you and I would say, I just love the look of those glasses. The shades on the glasses just remind me of some sort of animal, like a tiger and so on. It drew me to you.
I would think that was weird, though.
It could be seen as weird. It could be seen as creepy, but it's a nice segue because you're talking indirectly about something. You can go in with a joke. You can go in with just a little bit of a conversation. And what you're looking to do at that point is establish a rapport. If
you're in the grocery store, I would imagine talking about whatever fruit or whatever thing they're picking up or like, how do you cook those? Or do you ever make this with that?
You got to be careful, though, because if you're going in, at least if you're a man who's asking a woman, hey, how do you cook this? How do you prepare this? She's not your mother.
Right.
And if you start asking her questions that put her in that motherly frame, you're less likely to get a date.
Okay.
If you go in and say something like, listen, have you ever tried this particular item cooked in this way? It's absolutely amazing. I got this recipe. I used it. Now it's something that you're sharing. If anything, it's something you can lead her to.
Right.
But if you go up and say, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm in the grocery store. I'm a little boy. Ah, mommy, save me. Chances are you're going to turn her off.
Right.
That's more creepy than going up and maybe using a pickup line of some sort that, okay, maybe it's a little odd. But she knows why you're there. She knows why you're approaching her. She's not assuming, oh, he wants to talk about steak.
Right.
No. He wants to meet you, hopefully see you naked at some point. But he's going up in a way that is not direct. And after talking for a few minutes, if she picks up on that energy, picks up on that vibe, you may have a better shot than if you simply go in saying, hey, I saw you over there. I really like you. I don't have time to waste. Here's my number. Let's talk. Let's go out for coffee.
Yeah, without knowing what... I was in the grocery store and some guy came up to me and just started quoting some beautiful poetry. Just like that. It made me smile, but I was like, okay. Like, okay, buzz off now, I'm like, okay, I'm done. So I thought that was very interesting. All right, here's somebody texting. I'm not sure I need or want to know all the dirty details. Keep in mind this person is with me now, and I always look towards the future, not the past. I do agree that one should know about kids or STDs and marriage. To me, interests, hobbies, work, family are what matter to me. That's from Steve.
Okay, Steve, would you still be as interested in your partner if your partner had a history, perhaps a criminal history? Maybe your partner is a registered sex offender.
Oh, gee, okay.
Does the past matter then? I mean, come on. It's easy to say, well, the past doesn't matter. Now, in most cases, a number
Nothing
of people...
is that. Most cases, it's unlikely it's going to be a registered sex offender.
Exactly. Okay. However, what if somebody was charged with something similar to that but was never convicted?
Mm-hmm.
Is that something that if you knew about it, maybe you wouldn't want that partner in your life? It's great to say we're looking towards the future and the past doesn't matter as much. However, if that past is something that can come back and bite you, then yeah, you need to know about it.
Right. Any other text messages? 514-800, or you can give us a call at 514-790-0991. What other examples of hard questions to ask? So, of course, again, going back to the hard questions you would ask because you want it to get serious, or you're thinking it's getting serious.
If we're talking about somebody who wants to get serious, so one of the biggest and hardest questions to ask is, tell me about your history involving mental health. Have you ever contemplated suicide? Have you ever attempted suicide?
Wow.
And this may seem like a question coming out of the blue. However, if you have any experience dating someone who suffers from deep depression or had suicidal thoughts, then it would become very important for you the next time you get involved with somebody before you get serious to ask that kind of a question.
Well, that's actually a good point, because there's, if you understand mental illness and there's a history of mental illness, and it comes back, bipolar disorder, whatever, is it being treated? Like, you'd want to know, how was it treated? Are you being followed? Is this something, you have to accept that, you have to get informed.
Yeah.
You'd have to get more knowledge about what this is in terms of whatever diagnosis it is. But that is a hard question to ask.
It's a very hard question.
Yee.
Just the question itself could be off-putting. Somebody hears a question like that.
First of all, it's taboo. Mental health issues we still don't talk about it openly. So
most people are really, really afraid to be asking the hard questions, not so much because of what they're going to hear, but what they have to do after what it is they hear. If they hear an answer they don't like, now they have to do something. And a lot of people aren't even aware of what their boundaries are until they're faced with it. So
before you ask the question, should you be prepared to act on whatever answer you get? In other words, know what, if they say yes, or if they say this, that you're prepared already, you've thought the scenario through?
In most cases, if you already know where you stand on something, you'll already know what it is you have to do. In cases where you want to get the information first because you don't know how you're going to react, well, that's part of life. That's part of dating as many people as possible and getting the relationship experience. You're not always going to know. You might go in there thinking, I'm open-minded, I can handle anything. And then when you're faced with the reality of it, open-minded or not, it's still bothering you. You can't get over it.
Well, it could be, it certainly can be things like where I've seen these situations where somebody has a fetish, or they're cross-dressers, or, things like that, come up either at the beginning. Usually they don't come up at the beginning. Nobody asks, do you have a fetish? I don't think that's a question most people ask.
You just reminded me of the movie Ed Wood.
Oh, yes.
The movie starring Johnny Depp about the director.
Yes.
And there's a scene in that movie where he turns to his new girlfriend and he says, I'm about to tell you something I've never told a woman on a first date before. I like to dress up in women's clothing.
There you go.
And you think, oh my goodness, he's asking that. He's saying that. Why? She might run. And she thought about it, and she said, okay.
But you see, that kind of honesty, a lot of people would say, okay, I think I can work with this, and then there's a discussion to be had at that point. So we'll continue this discussion right here on Passion on CJAD 800.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
Dating dilemmas tonight on Passion. We're talking about asking the hard questions. A couple of text messages for Frank. Frank Kermit is in studio with me. I've started dating someone who I've now seen for about once a week for the past 3 months, and we are both very busy and engaged with other facets of our life. Now, however, this person has voiced a place of space, needing to assess his overall game board, and claims that we have created a solid foundation of friendship, relationship, and at the same time needs space. I want to honor and respect his process and would like any feedback on how I should behave and support this space while still be able to show interest and care with the hopes of reconnecting again.
So you're telling me that you've been seeing each other for 3 months, once a week, and now he needs space.
That sounds like space to me, though, already, doesn't it? The fact that it's only once a week, that's not very much.
Well, when he says space, does that mean he doesn't want to see you once a week even? It's a red flag. Red flag. You want to give him space? I would say give him all the space that he needs so he starts missing you. Start dating somebody else.
Right.
If you're only dating once a week, you should still be open to dating other people throughout those 3 months. Period. Okay, right. You're not at a level where you should be committed to someone. So you're dating once a week, great. Spend the rest of the time looking for other people to date. And when someone at that level is saying, I need space,
something's going on there.
Yeah, it means either he's seeing somebody else or he wants to break up with you but doesn't have the
right. He doesn't want
the guts.
Right, he doesn't have the guts to say it. Someone else texts in, is it possible that Frank Kermit is exaggerating it a little? As your relationship develops, you ask more intimate questions. That's true. You ask more intimate questions. I don't know what they're referring to in terms of exaggerating, but...
well, maybe it's a type of questions that you would ask early on. However, if you have certain expectations early on, and we had talked about this where you only want to date just the one person and you hope the other person isn't dating 7 or 8 people while they're dating you. If you're going in with that expectation, you need to be asking those questions.
Right. Especially if you don't want to, if you're sleeping with somebody and you're uncomfortable with the fact that they're sleeping with other people and you don't know, in terms of transmission of, sexually transmitted infections, I'd want to know. Like, that's something that I think we should all know. No? Yeah. You should know if somebody you're sleeping with is sleeping with other people. I think you need to know that.
I think it depends on the level of commitment. Because again, if you go in with the expectation that you want to know, it's up to you to voice it and say, I want to know if you're with anybody else.
Yes, that's right.
If the other person says, okay, I'll tell you, and this is what I'm doing, or the other person has the right to say, I don't want to share my private life with you since we're only sleeping together and we've only been together.
My answer would be, then I can't sleep with you.
Okay.
Right?
Because
if I sleep with you, I'm sleeping with everybody else. I mean, technically,
Yes, technically,
and of course, you still want to be safe no matter what. But
however, most people don't always stick to their boundaries. They talk a good game, but when they're faced with, a person that doesn't want to tell me who else they're intimate with, my rule is I only want to sleep with someone who's only sleeping with me. Okay, make your choice. If that's what your boundary is, make your choice. But if you're not going to follow your own rules, don't be mad and don't start resenting the other person.
Right.
If they're going to tell you this is what you can expect from me and I'm not willing to answer those questions, then you've got your answer. The answer is they don't want to share that. So it's still up to you to make a decision as to what you do.
Right.
When people come to me for coaching and they start telling me, well, I got suckered into this. How did you get suckered into this? You asked a question, person says, I refuse to answer that. You still have the obligation to make a choice for yourself.
Right.
You can't say you got suckered into it just because you went along with something you didn't want to go along with.
Right.
It's part of growing up.
It is part of growing up, absolutely. What about, a lot of people have skeletons in their closet. I mean, clearly there can be, from giving up babies for adoption to abortions to marriages to, I don't know. I mean, there could be all kinds of, even, and one of the difficult ones, very difficult ones, I don't even know how you ask that, but it's, women who have, or men who have experienced sexual trauma.
Yes.
Because that affects the sexual relationship, or it could affect the sexual relationship.
Look, if you are reaching a point, and again, I'm going to use marriage as the ultimate example here. If you're reaching a point where you want to marry somebody and you can't, for whatever reason, bring up these subjects to discuss it as mature adults, that's a sign that you're not with the right person. At the very least, it's a sign.
Or that you need to develop some good communication skills or get some help for that.
Maybe it's a sign you're just not ready for that kind of commitment. There should be no taboo topics between couples about to get married. And if there's that one topic that says, no, this is the one topic we can't talk about, no, that's exactly the topic you need to talk about right now.
But, let's look at this for a minute, because the taboo topics, what are they? There's sex, there's money. Mm-hmm. Those are the two main, taboo topics in terms of bringing up.
Personal health, if you have a history with mental illness, I think
or mental illness is another taboo, although... usually if you're at the point where you're going to marry somebody, you would hope you would have seen something. You would have, had some indication.
Not if you don't know what to look for.
Right.
If you've never dated someone who suffers from, let's say bipolar, you may not even know what the signs are to look for.
Right.
So there's that, and any sort of victimization. Any time the person had been a victim in the past, that may come up.
I can't tell you how many couples I've met where they only found out way after that their partner had been molested.
Yeah, and they're right to be worried because there's a stigma. You admit that you are a victim of any sort of abuse, and it's not just sexual abuse, but it's any sort of abuse. I've met people who say, if I'm with somebody and they are a victim of some kind of abuse, I won't date them. There is a stigma. There's a lot of abandonment. People sometimes just don't know how to handle that. The partners say, well, I don't know what to do now. If they're dating someone who's got a background of sexual abuse, they don't want to identify like an abuser if they feel like trying to be intimate with their partner.
Yeah, but that's where communication is so important, because you can work with that. You can absolutely, you need compassion and patience, and you have to be willing to have that kind of compassion for your partner. And that's where I think that person is right about the more intimate it gets, the relationship, hopefully those are because you don't immediately put yourself out there in terms of vulnerabilities when these are all your things that make you so vulnerable.
Absolutely not.
You got to wait until you can trust your partner.
Everybody has the right to say, I choose not to answer that.
Right.
Everybody has the right to say, this is on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know at this point. Everybody has the right to say, I'm not going to answer that.
Right. You can ask the questions. I just reserve the right not to answer.
Yeah. And when you learn that you can trust the other person is when you're going to share it. However, there are some things that even if you trust the other person, you may not want to share it because depending on the culture you're from, depending on the background and who it's involving, you may not still want to share it with people. One of the things I suggest to people is to make a list of absolute deal breakers called I will not marry you if, and you write down a list of all the reasons you would not marry somebody, as well as...
That takes thought. Like, you really have to sit down and think this through.
Another thing you can do is that you can write down a list of questions, including the things from your past, as well as you mix them up with other questions that don't apply to you, and you show them to your partner and say, would you marry somebody that said yes to any of these things? Well, if your partner says, well, that's okay, that's not, and the thing that they're saying that's not okay happens to apply to you, you know that this is not going to work out anyway. You know that there's no future here. So you've been given the indication that getting married to this person is not a good idea.
And I hope it doesn't put them into a position where they would actually not tell them. Like saying, oh, so you wouldn't, you know what I mean? Like they would...
Well, I think that's the perfect position they should be in. If I have a skeleton in my closet and I find out that you've already said, you wouldn't marry somebody who's
that skeleton.
Who has that skeleton. I shouldn't be obligated to share that with you.
No, but then you're lying to me and you're...
No, what I'll do is I'll break up with you.
Oh, okay. But what I'm saying is the opposite. Is people who might lie about it so that they continue, they do get married.
No,
that's what I'm talking about. So we need to talk about the lying, about because people do, when they're caught, especially when they're caught off guard with certain questions and don't know how to answer, may automatically say no. No, that didn't happen, or no, I never did that, or no. And then, and as you get to know them, slowly the story starts to change. It's almost like, how many partners have you had? Oh, just, 3, and then 6 months later, and now it's 6.
And a whole bunch
now
of
it's like,
count.
right. And now, and then it just gets bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
So somewhere that's why you got to be able to know when to ask the question so you actually get the answer, the honest answer, because once you start getting lies and then one lie upon another lie, then you're losing the trust, and then the partner doesn't know what else you've lied about.
Well, at that point, any lie, whether it's a big lie or a small lie, is going to be a red flag. And if you're catching your partner in a lie, because as things are going on, that's when you need to pull out and say, okay, one lie is one thing, and now you've told me the truth. Is there anything else you need to tell me? Now's your chance to come clean. They don't come clean, and these other lies start coming up. Well, I didn't tell you because that person didn't count, and I didn't tell you this because I wasn't sure how you would handle that. I experimented with whatever. Sorry. At that point, too many lies. I don't want to go through this anymore. I'll demote you to friends with benefits. Thank you. And I'm not going to...
Or nothing.
Or nothing.
Right. So how do you catch a person in a lie like that,
This is one of the toughest questions I get, because the fact is, there's only a limited number of ways that you're going to be able to catch somebody in a lie. There are techniques that you can use, but those techniques also require you to put on a bit of a performance yourself. Generally speaking, people who are perpetual liars are constantly lying, and they're going to lie about big things, they're going to lie about small things. It's their repeating behavior pattern. You may not catch a perpetual liar on the small things, on the big things, but your chances are you're going to catch them on the small things, and when you have enough of them that you have doubt. When in doubt, stay out. If you don't trust somebody implicitly, you should not be pledging your life to them. You should not be trying to have children with them. It's that simple.
It's that trust. Absolutely. Dating Dilemmas tonight. Frank Kermit is in studio, dating coach and author of some best-selling books on the subject of dating. If you want to talk to us, 514-790-0991. You can text at 514-800. We're talking about asking the right questions, the hard questions. How do you do it? How do you get the answers? When to do it? And what do you really need to know before you get serious with someone? You're listening to Passion on CJAD 800.
You're listening to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito on CJAD 800.
Dating Dilemmas tonight. Frank Kermit in studio, as he is every month here. Frank is of franktalks.com. He's also the relationship writer for the West End Times newspaper. Let me get to some of your text messages. I've really appreciated this whole show so far. One thing another listener sent in was about waiting and giving space. Have you heard of experiences where committing to waiting and giving a person space to figure things out actually made it worth it, especially if the person feels like they have nothing to lose while waiting? Or is the risk too high? It's a good question.
It's a very good question. I only know of one couple that broke up, and then they broke up that one time, and then that's when they realized they really missed each other. They wanted to be together. They got back together, and that was it. They've been together ever since. They've since married, now have children together, and it's the only time. My personal philosophy is that if you're taking a break from each other to deal with something, and it's got to be something major, all right, in order for that break to happen. But if it's not something major, it's just, well, I want to see how I feel. Look, if you're taking a break now, you're not going to be able to handle it when life really gets difficult. What are you planning to do? You're going to take a break every time things get too tense? Well, I have to study for my exam, so I really just need a break. You don't need to break up the relationship just because you're studying for your exams. You may have to see each other less those few weeks, but to call off the whole relationship?
Right.
No.
But and when somebody says, I need space, what are they really saying?
In my opinion, they're saying, I want to see somebody else. And whether or not they're seeing somebody else, That's the attitude I take. You want space from me? It's one thing if you just need to focus on other things in your life, but you want to end the relationship so that you can focus on those things. If our relationship can't exist in tandem with you having to focus on things that are important, that's the red flag.
Right. And actually, healthy relationships do require a dose of space anyway. You have to be able to give each other space, and everybody has a different need for space, and we have to be able to understand each other's need for space and accept that we have that, and be able to live with that.
One of the space issues that come up in my coaching, sometimes someone will come to me and their partner's not with them, and they say, well, my partner doesn't want to have sex with me anymore. We're dating, but my partner still wants to hang out with me and just not have sex. And I said, well, when you're hanging out, what do? Oh, we watch a movie together, but it never gets sexual. I say, okay, you've become friends. My thought is, okay, the partner's probably dating somebody else, but doesn't feel comfortable having sex with more than one person in the same time period. Well, that's not really fair for the person who's sitting there waiting.
You're right, playing the waiting game. And you're talking about you have nothing to lose while waiting, but the act of waiting does something to your psyche,
it
right?
Damages you. First of all, you are losing something. You're losing time. Each of us here has a limited amount of time on this planet.
But I guess they're figuring, from what I understand, this question is if they have nothing to lose, meaning they're not spending that time doing anything anyway.
They should be.
Right.
They should be
there's your point. Right.
They should be doing something.
Get out there.
If someone doesn't want to spend Saturday night with you, if they don't like you enough to get naked with you, get out there. Meet somebody who does want to be naked with you.
It's not just about being naked, Frank.
Well, it's
really,
a start.
Okay?
That's a start.
It's not the start. The start is the intimacy. The naked should come after. But anyway, we're not going to argue that point now, boy, girl here. All right, I want to ask you a couple questions here. If, let's say you're asking a question, but you are not prepared to give, someone's asked you, well, what about you? And I suppose you better be prepared to answer the same question.
If you're not prepared to answer the very question you're about to ask, don't ask the question.
Right.
You better really evaluate how important it is for you. But if you don't want to share that answer, you better not be asking that question. There is no room in long-term relationship success for hypocrites.
Right.
You want to know everything about me? You better put out too. You don't want to put out? I don't have to put out.
Right. Well, that makes sense. What about someone who fears that their history or something in their past, that their partner will not be able to handle it, or they feel that it's so big what I'm carrying around that I don't know if anybody will understand, or I don't know if anybody will be able to cope with this.
As somebody who used to feel the same way, I get it. Okay? I really do get it, because you think nobody is going to be able to tolerate this. And life has taught me there's always somebody who can tolerate your past. There's always somebody who isn't going to be fazed by what you went through, who's not going to hold it against you, and may even just accept the fact that you went through it. Maybe is even going to love the fact that you went through it in the sense of who it helped you become. When you deal with somebody who's had a very rough past and they've conquered it, they've moved on from their past, you're now dealing with somebody who probably is a little bit more compassionate and open-minded in general.
Yeah, and has strength. They're showing strength in having done that.
There's always going to be somebody who can accept it. The key is just to find somebody who loves what you bring to the relationship and has a lot of acceptance for the baggage that comes along. When you find that, you have found that soulmate that you can build that foundation with.
Well said. Well said. So what other things, before we have a few minutes left, Frank, what other things are important? You're getting to know somebody, you're going on a date.
Keep your expectations very realistic. If you're just dating casually, you really don't need to know a lot about that person. That person doesn't need to know a lot about you. And if you're dating casually, that means you're both free to be dating other people and finding your true soulmate. That's what we're all here for. We're all here to find a soulmate. And if you're dating somebody but you have no intention of getting serious with them, stopping them from meeting their potential soulmate is unethical. Let's
say you start dating someone, and in your mind, you don't want to date seriously. This is for you, it's casual. isn't there an obligation somehow to tell your partners that that's what that's your expectation?
If you're dating somebody and in your mind you're already thinking, I don't see this getting serious. Whether or not it gets serious later on, I don't know. But for right now, I don't see this getting serious. The best thing you can do is encourage them to date other people while they're dating you.
But you have to tell them,
yes,
this is where I'm at.
Yes.
I have no plans to turn this into a relationship. I don't want a relationship. I'm not ready for a relationship, whatever it is. So if you're interested, here it is.
That's right.
But not telling them would not be
not
very ethical.
telling them is being a jerk.
Yeah, don't be a jerk. 514-790-0991 if there's anything you want to add to this, or you can text us, as so many people have here tonight, at 514-800. Okay, somebody wrote in, I'm not sure if this is exactly what we want to talk about here, but somebody wants to know how they can convince their partner, their girlfriend, to have anal sex for the first time.
Forget about trying to convince her. Find out why she's against it. What's the reason? If the reason is she just doesn't feel comfortable about it, find out what would make her feel comfortable. If the reason is that she's had some sort of a history of trauma with it, well, then it's a boundary that I personally wouldn't cross. If she's not ready to do it, let it be. If it could be, and this is something you need to be aware of, it could be that she would do it with somebody else. She just doesn't want to do it with you because she doesn't feel safe with you.
That's a possibility, but I can also tell you that the more you pressure and the more you make that like that you're pushing for something, shows that you're not caring about how she feels, and that will put her off even more and push her further away.
I would be curious to find out why it's so important to him as well.
Right.
Because is it important to him because he's done it with every single girl he's dated and it's his way of feeling close? Is he pushing for it because he's never done it and he really wants to do it and he sees himself as, I don't want to date anybody else, I just want to date this person, it's something I've never done? What's the psychology there? Why does he want it so badly? Once we figure out why he wants it so badly and she's not into it, somewhere in there may be a compromise.
Right. All right. Makes a lot of sense. As you always do, my dear Frank. And before we go, let me just share with our listeners a couple of events happening. February 5th, next Tuesday, I am giving a talk called The Real Truth, Adolescent Sexuality, taking place at the Gelber Conference Center. It's put on by UTT Herzliya. I'll be talking about, adolescent sexuality and how to cope with our adolescents' emerging sexuality, what it's all about, what you can expect, and how to talk to them about it. That is taking place again February 5th, 7 p.m. Just show up at the Gelber Conference Center. Tickets are $20, $25 at the door. There will be refreshments served there as well. And another thing happening, you've heard me talk about this many times, and it's been it's been all over the news, even French newspapers, so people are getting wind of our big party taking place on Friday, February 8th. It is a fundraiser to raise funds for sexual health education put on by the Sexual Health Network of Quebec, of which I happen to be the president. It is our Sextravaganza 2013, taking place at the beautiful Auberge Saint-Gabriel in Old Montreal. And there's going to be a lot of fun stuff happening. First of all, we're going to have some amazing burlesque entertainment with some of the most well-known Montreal burlesque dancers from Mondosé, which is going to be amazing. They're so beautiful, and the way they dance, anyway, they're really, really spectacular. There's going to be an interactive matchmaking session throughout the evening, so single people can come. It's for everybody. It's open for singles and couples, but single people who want to participate will have a special designation. We're going to have a local celebrity date auction, so we have a couple of people who are up for auction. Myself, for a dinner provided by Mangeoire. Myself, Suzanne Deshotel, Andrew Carter, among others. So that'll be a lot of fun. And there's a chance to win a trip to Temptations Resort. I don't think I have time to take... Well, let me just get to Laurie real quick here on the line. Hi, Laurie. Welcome to the show.
Hi. Very quickly, I was interested in lies in a relationship and how they should or should not be tolerated. I dated somebody who told me quite literally 192 lies in the first 4 months. When I caught him out, he went to therapy. That's how I discovered there were 192. He promised he wouldn't do it again. Did it several times over the following couple of years. I finally broke off with him. He tells me I'm being unreasonable because the few lies he told me in the past year were just little things. They didn't actually count, and I'm actually holding his past against him.
I think you're doing the right thing, Laurie.
Okay.
Sounds like you were, but we both agree with that. Laurie, we've run out of time. Thanks so much for calling in. I wish we could stay longer, but alas, we cannot.
Listen to Passion with Dr. Laurie Betito, live weeknights 10 to 11 on CJAD and CJAD.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, and relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. Coaching available in person, by phone, and by Skype. For singles, couples, and alternative lifestyles, franktalks.com.
If you need help with your relationships, my buddy Frank, he's got some tips. Just go to franktalks.com. His advice is better than your mom's. He knows what you're going through, Frank has been there too. So log on to franktalks.com. franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating and relationships? Visit franktalks.com.
Need help with love, sex, dating, or relationship issues? Help from Frank Kermit, the best-selling author and Canada's most international relationship coach, is only a click away at franktalks.com. What do you do when you feel like a fool? When your heart has been broken again? Pick up the phone or get onto Skype and talk on a private session. Yeah, get a little help from Frank Talks. Whoa, whoa, get by with a little help from Frank Talks. You gotta try a little help from Frank Talks. What do you do when your love goes away? Try coaching one-on-one. How do I sign up to turn things around? Just sign up at franktalks.com. Yeah, get by with help from Frank Talks. I get by with little help from Frank Talks. Time to try a little help from Frank Talks. Doesn't cost a lot of money. It's the best rate going around. Could it cost a lot of money? Oh, it's worth every cent that you will put down. Yeah. Frank Talks. Oh, you got to go to get your help from Frank Talks. for certain, just read the reviews. Frank knows his stuff, and Frank's several goods. Good love can soon come to you.